Okay, good evening, everybody. Mesilas Yesharim, Finding Your Path. Perek Yud Aleph, chapter 11. We're continuing with the midah, with the character trait of nikiyut, cleanliness. As we said before, we've reached a different level now. This is, as the author said, a higher level of what we saw at the beginning called zehirut, watchfulness, being careful not to transgress the negative, so-called negative mitzvahs of the Torah. And even when a person, as he said in the previous chapter, when in the introduction to this particular character trait, this midah, when a person has successfully trained himself to physically hold himself back from doing an aveira, nevertheless there still lurks there the desire for it. In other words, he's controlling himself, but he hasn't yet cleaned himself, he hasn't made himself naki from the underlying causes of the motivation to do the sin, to do the aveira. And the kiyut, as we discussed last week, is the midah by which a person, and as we finished off by saying last week, the way you get to that midah is by constantly refraining, training yourself physically, withholding, and this eventually builds up inside a person an underlying change, as much as it's possible, in his desires, and he finds that he is eventually, after many, I'm not going to say how long it takes, but eventually if a person constantly habituates himself to the good, to withstand the forces of the Yetzer Hara, to make him to do things that he shouldn't do, eventually that will bring him to the midah of nikiyut. Now this chapter 11, which is called the Pirtei, the details of the midah of nikiyut. This is a very, very long chapter, so we're certainly not going to be able to finish it. He goes into great detail about all kinds of underlying hidden traps that a person may not be aware of, and we'll start straight in. So prote midas nikiyus rabim heim ma'oid. The details when it comes to become a naki, somebody who's cleansed himself from all vestiges of sin, of transgressing the Torah's laws. They're very, very many, the details in themselves. Hinam b'kol haprotim sheb'kol shlosh meos u'shishim chomesh mitzvahs lo sa'aseh. They really are the details, the fine points of all the 365 lo sa'asehs. Don't do mitzvahs in the Torah. Ki amnam inyan amida kava amarti shehu lios noki mikol anfei haveros. Even though that the general overall principle of this midah of nikiyus is to be clean from all of the branches of that aveira, v'lam afal pi shebechol ha'averos mishtadel hayetzer hara lachati es ha'odam kava yesh bahem shehateva mechamdon yoseh uvehen marlo yoseh heterim. Asher al kein itztorech behen yoseh chizuk l'natzech es yitzroi l'nakos min achet. So he said, even though that in every aveira, the Yetzer Hara will try to trip a person up and get him to do that aveira. However, there are those aveiras which the nature of a person leans towards more than others. Anything where physical desire is concerned, a person is more prone to, in other words, for example, a person's you're not allowed to drink the blood of an animal. So I don't see too many people rushing out to drink the blood. It's an issa, but the desire for it is fairly minimal, I would guess. But there are other aveiros which I think are quite obvious, where a person's nature draws him towards them. And of course, and therefore he says, it's necessary, as far as those are concerned, yoseh chizuk, greater strengthening to vanquish the Yetzer Hara and to clean himself from that particular chet. And that's what Chazal say in the Gemara in Chagiga, Gozel v'aroyos nafsho shel odom machamdaton umis'ava lehem. Theft and sexual immorality, the nature of a person desires them, and wants them. And of course, so in those areas, a person needs greater strength to resist. We see, now most people don't go around, with black masks on and a bag marked swag on their back. Most people aren't climbing in bedroom windows to steal. Most people aren't holding people up at a gunpoint to take their money from them. That they will literally put their hand out to take the money of somebody else, and put it into their pockets, into their wallets. Now, rubam to'amim tam geneva b'masam uvamatom. Most people, as he said, even though they're not outright bandits, they taste the taste of theft in their business dealings, as we'll see. B'ma sheyoru hetel atzmam lihistaker ish behefsedo shel chaveru, inasmuch as they give them a heta to benefit from the loss of somebody else. V'yomru la'arviach shoni. It sounds like a phrase that could have come out of the newspapers today. And people say to themselves, business is different, or business is business. What does it mean, business is business? Business is business. Business is basically a heta to say they're anything short of something which is totally illegal. And very often things which cross that line, that's okay, that's business. So there's a very good example of where people allow themselves to do things which are illegal, or certainly immoral, or certainly have crossed the line into what the Torah would consider to be theft. But of course, there's this covering blanket of security called business is business. Vulam lavin harbe nemru begosel. However, there are many different don't do mitzvahs, which the Torah says. You see all these different words for not stealing. Lo shok, don't oppress, means don't steal. Lo sigzol, don't steal openly. Lo sisgonvu, don't steal secretly. That's coming in the depth of the night. V'lo sechachashu, don't exploit. V'lo seshakru, ish ahamiso, shouldn't lie one person to another. Lo sonu ish es achiv, you shouldn't oppress a person. You shouldn't put undue pressure on a person in order to make him sell something. All of these are kinds of gezel. Lo sasig gvul ra'echo, do not move the boundary. If people have two properties next to one another, there's always a temptation to just move it a little bit. He doesn't need that space, I'll take that space. It's only it's a foot. What's a foot? A person always finds, when it comes to things that he wants, when it comes to gezel, that he has to be very careful, because the Yetzer Hara is there giving him all kinds of, he's standing there with this big talus over his head. The Yetzer Hara is saying, it's fine, you don't have to worry about it, it's normal, natural. Everybody does it. You need it more than he does. All of the kinds of terutzim that the Yetzer Hara has, full up to the brim. These are all different aspects and parts of theft, kolim masim rabim, which include many, many different actions. Minamasim ha naasim b'chlal masa umatan, when a person comes to get involved in business. Hamadini, general business dealings. V'kulam asurim rabim, and in all of these there are many different isurim, prohibitions. Kilo amase hanika amufusam be'oshek ubegozel hulevada also. Because not just open, plain highway robbery is the issa that the Torah talks about when it's talking about theft. Elakol shesov sov yagia elov v'yigrom oso. Anything which is eventually going to bring him to the point of theft stops along the way. Kavahu bichlal isa. Very interesting point. This, even something which is not out and out Geneva, but is something which is leading to that, is also considered to be part of the Isser of Geneva, of Gezel. And Chazal said this in Sanhedrin, Pei Aleph on the base, verse Eishes Re'ehu Lo Timo. Now literally, this posuk means, and your wife, the friend of your wife, you should not impurify, you should not pollute. Now that's a posuk in Yechezkel. But the Gemara in Sanhedrin understands, what does that mean? Shelo yorad la'umnus, chavero. You shouldn't take the trade of your fellow away. If somebody's doing business in some particular area, whatever, he's let's say he's a barber, you shouldn't sneak ahead and find some ways of taking his clients away. That's considered to be polluting his wife. It's a very strong language, but that's the degree of the seriousness. Rabbi Yehuda is lechen v'ni shelo yechalek klayos v'gozim letinokus kedei lahargilon sheyavo eitzlo. And already Rabbi Yehuda prohibited storekeepers from handing out nuts and sweeties, we would say nowadays, and candies and to the small children, in order to accustom them, to habituate them to come to use his shop. And even though subsequently, even though Rabbi Yehuda also did, the Chomim came along and they matted it. They said it's allowed for a storekeeper to do that. The only reason they did that is because the storekeeper next door can also resort to the same forms of incentives. And if you look at advertising now, and I've just been reading a book about Amazon and Jeff Bezos, it's very fascinating. The ruthlessness and the degree of the psychology and the sharpness that goes into figuring out ways of enticing people to basically get their money. I mean, it's a black art, and it's very clever and very frightening, and all of these things where you're basically we'll see. And if you think of the whole world of advertising, it's really, he's going to come on to hint to, of course, there wasn't advertising as we know it in his day, but the same underlying principles of unfair trading and unscrupulous trading are all considered to be outright theft. That's theft. Amr Zichron Levracha says in Bava Basra, Kosher Gezel Ha'hedya Megezel Gavoya. Stealing from other people is worse than stealing from Hashem. Stealing from Hashem, for example, if you take an animal which has been dedicated for a sacrifice and you do what's called me'ila, you take it home and you make a nice Barbie out of it. So that's me'ila, that's called misappropriation of temple property. Could be other things as well, maybe it doesn't have to be a korban, doesn't have to be a sacrifice, an animal. Could be anything that's set aside for the bedek habayis, for the use of the temple, that you derive personal benefit from, is an issa of me'ila. But says the Gemara in Bava Basra, it's worse to steal from human beings, from your fellow man, than from Hashem. And the Gemara over there learns that shezeh hiktim chet leme'ila, v'zeh hiktim me'ila lechet. Now, it's not very clear from what he's saying here, but what he's saying is basically that the order of the words in the posuk, the word chet, sin, precedes the word me'ila, misappropriation. When speaking about ben adam lechavero, when speaking about a person's, stealing by using something which doesn't belong to him, when that comes to a human being, a relationship of man to his fellow, the word chet, sin, comes before the word misappropriation. Whereas, when it comes to talking about Hashem, bedek habayis, the temple, misappropriation of temple property, etc., then the order of the Pesukim is the Me'ila precedes the Chet. The word Me'ila, misappropriation, precedes the word sin, which the Gemara darshans from that it's considered to be a lesser infraction to steal from Hashem than it is from your fellow man. Again, showing the seriousness of any form of illicit misappropriation or stealing, in whatever small way, whatever subtle and underhand way that might be. Kafar portu es hapolim ha'oisem etzel ha'balabayis mibirkas hamotzi. Now, ad kadei kach, when a person is hired, he's a day worker. Could even be not even a day worker, but a worker. Chazal potted him from saying Hamotzi lechem min haaretz before eating his meal, while in the employ of his employer. Why? Because your employer is paying you for your time, and you, therefore, by saying Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, are basically taking away from his time. And they also potted a worker, Mebrachos Achronos, the Birkas Hamazon, Va'afilu b'kirat Kriyas Shema, Lo chiyuvam levatel milamelachton ela b'pasha rishona bilvad. Also, the after brachas of Birkas Hamazon. Now I have a feeling. Just 1 second in.
It means after the first.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought. Even though it doesn't say it here, it means everything after the first bracha. So all you have to do is say Hazon es Hakol. That's all you're allowed to do. And even the Kriya Shema, to say Kriya Shema, you are potter, exempt from saying all of Kriya Shema, except for the first paragraph. That's all. So, Kal v'choyma, ben benog shel kal v'choyma. It's a beautiful expression. It's like like all the more so, and how much all the more so. Literally, kal v'choyma means an a fortiori argument. It doesn't sound so good in English, but so this kal v'choyma ben the son of the kal v'choyma, the most extremity that you could possibly have of an a fortiori argument, an argument which says if this is true, then how much the more so is this is true. The devei rishus, meaning if you see that it's also to do more than say the first bracha of Kriya Shema, first paragraph of Kriya Shema, first bracha of Birkas Hamazon, and that's all, and anything more than is considered to be stealing. So how much the more so that if a person's got a job and he's spending his time surfing on the internet, even if he's looking at things which aren't forbidden, or buying stuff on Amazon, well, that's theft. You're stealing someone's time. Shekol schia yom osa behem shalosh shalol lebatel memalachtel shel balabais. Any day worker, and it could be that somebody who's got certain different terms of employment, there's a certain degree of him having his own free time built into it, but certainly any day work, anybody who's hired by the day, whatever he's hired for, that is entirely not his time. Goslan. If he transgresses that, he is called a thief. Pure and simple. Hinei and Abachilkia, who, when working as a day worker, I guess, he, to the extent that he would not interrupt for fear of stealing from his employer, if a Talmid Chacham would come by him and greet him and say Shalom Aleichem, he wouldn't even answer them, for fear of that being considered to be a stealing time from his employer. That he shouldn't neglect the work of Re'ehu, his fellow, his employer. Yaakov Avinu said himself, and he said to Lavan, his father-in-law. So it says in Bereshis, Hayisi vayom achalti cherev. I was consumed by drought during the day. In other words, because of his working so hard and not wishing to neglect his job for a single second. So, Hayisi b'yom ochalti chorev. I was consumed by drought during the day. V'kerech balayla. And frost at night. V'tida shanasi me'enoi. And I pushed aside sleep from my eyes in order to fulfill the terms of his employment. Mayano efa ha'oiskim ba'hanosehem b'shas malacha uvatelu mimenu. So what are those people going to answer? Those people who are enjoying their pleasures, whatever it is they're doing, they call in America goofing off when the time they're supposed to be working. What are they going to say when their time comes to answer up for everything they did. O ki yasku b'chevtzehem ish levitzori. Same idea. How can a person, what are these people going to say to justify their negligence? So klal shel davar, the general overarching principle is hasocha eitzel chaveru, somebody who accepts a job, he's rented, so to speak, he's employed by his fellow, la'eza malacha shetiyeh, in whatever way that might be. Hinei kol shosov mechuros hein lo liomu. All of the hours of his day are now sold to this person. Ki inyan sha'omru zichron l'rocha, as Chazal say, schirus mechira liyome. That schirus, when you hire somebody, it's like you sold yourself for the day. You are not your own man. You do not own yourself. At whatever time you hired yourself out, you are not your own. You do not belong to yourself. And anybody who takes any of that time for their own pleasure or for their own needs, they are considered to be a complete thief. And if the owner does not agree to give way on that, to forgive that, whatever that particular thing is, he's not mochel. He stands guilty for that. It says that Chazal already said in Yuma, Aveira shebein adam lechaveira ein yom hakipurim mechaper ad shirtze es chaveira. That aveira is between adam lechaveira, man and his fellow. Yom Kippur does not atone for those until the person who was wronged is appeased. And so he's bringing a proof here to say that don't think that you can, the only way you'll be able to be forgiven for this stealing of time is by receiving forgiveness from the person that you stole from. And also, don't think that, let's say you're going to, you're employed for somebody and you spend your time getting on the phone trying to raise charity for a yeshiva. So don't think that that's a mitzvah, because that's not considered to be righteous. It's not going to be chalked up to you on your scorecard. It's going to be an aveira. That's mamish going to be an aveira. She'ein aveira mitzvah. An aveira can never become a mitzvah. Ukroksiv, it says in the posuk, in the posuk, in Yeshayahu, soine gozel ba'oilo, that Hashem hates gozel, theft, in an ola, meaning Hashem, if you try and bring a stolen animal as a korban, Hashem loathes it, He hates it. It's not a mitzvah at all. It's an aveira, complete aveira. Chazal also said this in Bava Kama. Harei shegozel sa chitim u techona va'afa u'mavarich ein ze mavarich ela min ha'etz. Somebody who steals a saw, a dry weight, a flour, and he grinds it, and he bakes it, and it's all right. And then, of course, he's very frum. So what's he going to do? He's going to take challah. He's going to make a bracha when he takes the challah. Lafrish challah mina isa, ein zeh mavarich. That's not making a bracha. That's not a blessing. That's blaspheming. By saying that bracha on something stolen, you have blasphemed Hashem's name. The chsiv is in Tehillim, uvotzea beirech ni etz Hashem. The thief who blesses has blasphemed Hashem. Similar to says, Oy loy lezeh, shenasa senegoiro kategoiro. Woe is he to the one who's made his defense lawyer into his prosecution lawyer. Meaning, the defense lawyer obviously is a mitzvah. When a person does a mitzvah, he acquires himself a defense in Shemayim. And he turned that defense lawyer, into a prosecutor. As it says in Yerushalmi and Sukkah Perek Gimel, Be'inyan lulav agozel, with regard to a stolen lulav. V'adin noisein, and it's obvious. Ki harei gezel chevetz gezel, that when you steal something, that is gezel. The gezel's man is also gezel. Stealing time is also stealing. There's no difference. Time and place, time, it's all the same. You can steal both, and both are equally valid and both are equally serious. And just like a person who steals an object, a lulav, let's say, and he does a mitzvah with it, he waves the lulav, he makes a bracha, does everything on the Arba Minim. A sheikh is on mitzvah of, what's it, I forgot now, Al Natilas, thank you. Al Natilas lulav. And it's a mamish and a vera gemura. He's turned that defendant into, his defending lawyer into a prosecutor. Mitzvah. So if he steals the time and he goes out and he collects tzedakah or whatever, where he should be working for this person, he's also turned his defense lawyer into his prosecutor. Hashem only wants from a person trust, righteousness, emunah, to act in a faithful way. V'chein hu oimer also says, emunim notzeh Hashem. Hashem protects notzeh Hashem emunim, that Hashem protects the faithful. V'oimer says, Yeshaya, pischu sharim v'yavo goy tzadik. Let the doors open up and let the righteous people come in, shomer emunim, because they have waited trustingly. They've waited for Hashem with emunah, with trust, with faithfulness. V'oimer says in Tehillim, Einai b'nei eretz losheves imodi. That Einai, the eyes of the eyes of the trustworthy ones. No, I'm sorry. Can you tell me, how was he saying? Yeah, the Tehillim. Einai b'nei eretz, the eyes of the faithful of the land. My eyes are on the trustworthy of the land. They will dwell with me, says Hashem. V'oimer says in Yirmiyahu, Einecha, halo le'emuna. Einecha, your eyes, Hashem, halo le'emuna, they are towards those who are righteous. I think we're going just a little bit more. Okay, yeah, we'll do a little bit more. Vaf Eov, Job, Ha'id al Atzma v'Amar. He testified about himself and he said, Im titeh ashuri mini hadorech va'acha einai halach libi u'bekapai davak mu'um. Was it that my feet turned from the way, and after my eyes went my heart, and to my hands did anything stick, cleave? Says Mesilas Yesharim, see how beautiful this moshel is. Key Dima hagoizel habilti nigle kedava hamisdabek biyad adam. He compares unrevealed theft, underhand theft, like something which sticks to the hands of a person. Because even though a person doesn't go lechatchila from the get-go to go and actually take something, that's not his intention. Nevertheless, vinisha davek ma'elov, but it will become stuck to his hands automatically by itself. Sof biyodahu, and in the end of the day, that's called it's in his hands. There's no difference if it's stuck to his hands unwittingly or if he actually took it away. That's what we're talking about here. Even the person though doesn't go and he actually steals openly. Kashahu yodov reikonis memenu legamre. It's very difficult that a person's hands should be completely clean of anything that happens to be in them, figuratively speaking, where there wasn't some kind of a theft at some level. And this all comes, as we saw from the Pasuk in Eov, this all comes from the domination of the heart over the eyes. It says, Chazal say, Halo ayin roeh, the eye sees, v'halev choimed, the heart desires, and the rest of the organs of the body, the limbs of the body, complete the Aveira. It all starts with looking where you shouldn't look. Shelo yaniach lios noim lehem es shel acherim. When you look at whatever it is that somebody else has, his car, his home, his wife, his whatever it is that you look, the looking there is the start, is the beginning of the desire. Ha'inayim moshchim es alev. The eyes draw the heart. Levakesh, to seek heterim, permissions, way of justifying, rationalization. Alma shinir lehem yofe, to get those things that appeal, that are beautiful in the eye of the beholder, v'nechmad. Al kain omri Yov. That's why Yov says, we saw before, shehu lo kain osa. He didn't do that. He didn't look. V'lo halach libo acha'inov. He didn't allow his heart to follow his eyes because he kept his eyes away from looking. Al kain lo davak b'kapav mu'um. And that's why, because once you look, it's very difficult not to desire. And once you desire, the heart will find all kinds of ways of justifying what it wants. Okay. Reina, that's it. Maybe. Yeah, I think we'll stop here. We'll pick up here from this point next week. Okay. All the best.